Timing with Elevation every weekend here. In today's video, we're going to cover the top 5 fat bikes for 2021 under $1,500. I recently did another video covering the top 10 fat bikes for 2021, but that price point was from $1,500 up to about $3,500. I mentioned in that video I might be willing to do a video looking at the entry level end of things, and I actually had a lot of comments on that video asking me to do so. So that's what we're going to cover today. So today's video is the result of my own research, my own experience, and knowing a couple people that have a couple of the bikes on these lists. So using terms like budget, entry level, low cost are very subjective. So there's going to be a range of bikes, but again, they are all going to be $1,500 or less. You'll get a good spread on the bikes that are actually available, but the bikes on this list are at a range of price points up to $1,500. So a lot of people buying a bike in this price range are looking to buy their first fat bike, or they're only going to use it for, niche purposes, like only in the winter, only for snow rides. So for some people, it may only be a handful of times a year. So a lot of the bikes on this list, kind of fall into those two categories. This is how I started as well. I bought a fat bike just to ride it in the snow in the winter. And initially, the first couple of years, I pretty much only rode it that way. But over time, I started riding more and more frequently. And, at this point in time, I have multiple fat bikes and ride a fat bike 90% of the time. But I think for most people, a fat bike is going to be an extra bike that they're going to use for targeted purposes. So even though I'm calling this the top 5 fat bikes under $1,500, a couple of the brands on this list have more than one. So I'm going to cover all the bikes that meet the criteria. And stay tuned to the end of the video because I'm going to give a bonus pick, and it may well end up being the best possible option in the $1,500 and under price range. So let's get to the first bike. So the first brand on the list is Mongoose, and this is a brand that has been around a long time, and they have a pretty high name recognition. The lowest cost bike on this list is the Argus ST at $429, and it is a 26-inch wheel by 4-inch tire fat bike. This bike is a steel frame bike, steel fork bike. It has very entry-level part spec on it and has low-end wire bead tires, so it's a very heavy bike. One of the other factors to point out is the drivetrain is a 1x7 drivetrain, so this is a very limited range of gearing. The current model does have cutouts in the wheels, which probably helps a little bit on the weight of the bike and especially in the rolling resistance. But I do suspect it's still probably the heaviest bike on this list. I actually do know someone that has a version from a couple years ago called the Dolomite, and that bike literally weighs 40 pounds. Now it does not have cutouts in the wheels, which probably adds to the weight. But nonetheless, the feedback is with the bike being about 40 pounds, having the very limited gear range in the drivetrain, it's just not a very pleasant bike to ride anything beyond bike paths. So this bike really is only suitable as a bike path bike. For most people, it's probably not really going to be suitable for any kind of trail use, extensive snow use, things like that. Next up is another Mongoose. It's the Argus Trail. It comes in at $649 and also has 26 by 4-inch wide tires on it. It does benefit from the upgrade of being an aluminum frame and fork bike, so that would certainly probably cut some weight out of the bike. The part spec is still very similar, very low-end parts, has quick release axles, no through axles. The drivetrain is slightly upgraded to a 2x8 drivetrain, so you definitely get a little bit more of a gear range to work with. So it's probably a much more pleasurable bike to ride than the ST. This is probably a bike that I would consider like minimally adequate as far as it's a little bit lighter with the aluminum frame and has a little more gearing to help you move the weight of the bike. But again, it does still have the same low-end wire bead tires, which are extremely heavy in construction. And the third entry from Mongoose is the Argus Sport. It comes in at $949. It also has 26-inch wheels, but actually comes with 4.8-inch tires. It is also an aluminum frame and fork design. It does still have the quick release axles, but other parts and aspects of it are upgraded. It actually does have hydraulic disc brakes. It has a more modern 1x10 drivetrain, and it even has a Dior rear derailleur. Definitely parts you would see on some much more expensive bikes. The tires are upgraded too, as they're actually folding bead tires, so much lighter, much more supple than the wire bead tires that the other two have. This bike probably offers much more performance capability than the other two. Although I would say at this price point, like nearing $1,000, I would probably lean towards other options, but at least this bike does have some of the more modern amenities. Next up on the list is the company Diamondback. So Diamondback is another one that has a fairly high name recognition. They've been around for quite a while, and they actually make a full range of bikes from the low end all the way up to higher end carbon fiber bikes of all types. So they definitely have a reliable pedigree in the industry. And they also have multiple entries. First up is the El Oso Uno. It comes in at $850 and has 26 by 4-inch tires. It is a steel frame and fork, but it does have a more modern drivetrain, a 2x9 drivetrain. It does have quick release axles, not through axles, so that's something to take note of. It does have generally decent name brand spec parts on there. Of course, they're at the low end of the spectrum, but they are all recognizable name brand parts. It does have wire bead tires, so again, a tire upgrade would probably benefit this bike, as there's significant weight in those wire bead tires. I actually know someone that owns the version from 2016. They're pretty satisfied with the bike. They do still ride it regularly in stock form, so it does perform fairly well as spec'd for light duty use. And then the second entry is actually the most expensive bike on this list, which comes in right at $1,500, and that's the El Oso Dos. It comes with 26-inch wheels and 4.5-inch wide tires, and the tires are actually folding bead Kendas, so they actually come with some pretty good tires. This bike has a number of upgrades over all the bikes we've covered so far. It is an all aluminum frame and fork, but it's the first bike on the list to have through axles front and back, and in conjunction with that, it has the modern fat bike standards of 150 millimeter wide front spacing and 197 millimeter rear spacing, which is what most of your higher end fat bikes with through axles will come with. So this is a bike that will have more support going forward as far as upgrades and things like that. Third on my list is a little bit of a different pick because it's not a brand per se. It is a bike retailer called Bikes Direct. They've been around for quite some time, and they're known for selling good solid bikes at heavy discounts. They're a popular option for somebody who's not looking to spend a lot of money but wants high value. They tend to offer a couple different brands and lines of bikes, and they'll have a full range from lower end steel and aluminum options to even carbon frame options, but all heavily discounted, and you can usually get a pretty good solid bike for the money through them. So looking at their website right now, they have a couple options from Motobukan in the $899 to $1199 range that would fit this list. So either of those would be a reasonable option. They have good spec for the price points. And Motobukan's been around for quite some time, and knowing people that have those bikes, they've always been very satisfied with them. And then more at the lower end of what they offer is the Gravity line. They're in that $799 to $899 range, and they're typically spec'd like some of the lower cost bikes I mentioned earlier, but again, still potentially an option, if that's your maximum price point. Fourth on the list is the Norco Bigfoot 3. Some of their bikes really could have or even should have been on my previous mid-price list. They definitely make great bikes. They're well regarded in the industry. Again, they make a wide range of bikes in all different types. And the Bigfoot 3 comes in at $1,300. And one of the unique things about this, it actually has a more progressive design element in that it's the only bike on this list with 27.5-inch wheels. So it comes with 27.5 by 4.6-inch tires. So again, that's a more modern evolution of the fat bike, and it's the only one on this list that has that. Norco also has 3 other fat bikes priced higher than this, so I think this bike definitely benefits from kind of a trickle-down effect. The R&D and design that went into those higher-end bikes, I think probably filters down to this bike as well. And it really kind of shows it, again, as I mentioned, in the wheel size, but also in the drivetrain. It's a 1x11 drivetrain, so has definitely a more modern, common drivetrain spec. It is a through axle bike, front and back, and again has that common standard of 150 millimeter front, 197 millimeter wide spacing. So it's another bike, like if you're on a tight budget and you can just afford this bike, it's a bike that down the road you could actually upgrade some parts on it and make significant upgrades to the bike itself as time goes on. And number 5 on my list is Rocky Mountain. So this is another well-regarded company that makes a wide range of high quality bikes in all disciplines. The bike we're covering on this list is the Blizzard 10, and it comes in at $1,249, and it comes with 26 by 4.6-inch wide tires. Much like the Norco, it also comes with a really good solid spec on parts, and even comes with good tires. It has a fairly modern 1x10 drivetrain. It does have Dior parts, Tektro brakes. Much like Norco, it also has 3 other bikes in the fat bike line at higher price points, and I also think this bike benefits from kind of that R&D trickle-down effect. It's another really good solid bike you could get into at a reasonable price point, and over time upgrade parts and make it a much better performer. Now that we've covered the top 5, I did want to give you that bonus pick, which actually does have the potential to be the best possible option on this list, and that is the used market. The used market is challenging, especially right now, because it is definitely a seller's market and bikes are not lasting very long when they hit the market. But in the used market, you have the benefit of potentially getting a much better bike for a better price than you could otherwise afford by buying brand new. You know, my example of that is when I bought my first fat bike, which was a 2014 Surly Pugsley. I bought that in 2016 or 2017, and I only paid $640 for that bike. I was literally able to buy a legendary quality steel frame fat bike that has tons of capability with a good solid part spec for less than most of the bikes on this list. So again, I would encourage anyone who's in the market for a fat bike to at least start looking at the used market and be ready to pounce if something comes up, because you do have to act fast. There's always the potential to get something much higher quality than you could otherwise afford by buying it brand new. The only thing to be aware of, if you're not very experienced with bikes, you probably want to have somebody, a friend or family member that does know bikes well, to go with you and at least be able to look at a used bike just to make sure it is in good working order. I mean, the best option is if you can get it to a bike shop and have it inspected before you buy. That would obviously be the best option, not always possible. I did want to bring up one more thing that's probably not so pleasant, and it's just being cautious of looking at some of the online big box store. These are usually online retailers and big box stores that are not bike specific places. You just want to be cautious buying bikes from these sources. Posting an example right now, this is from a big box store retailer website, and if you look at this bike, you can see that the front fork is actually installed backwards. So it's a huge red flag, and it doesn't necessarily mean that this particular bike is unsafe. It is just a red flag and something to be aware of, that there are retailers out there selling bikes really cheap. Even though the price is low, it still may end up being a poor value. And if you do buy a bike that's not from a bike specific place or from a used from a third party, I would definitely recommend taking it to a bike shop, spending the money to have them go through the bike, make sure it is set up properly. That's not only for safety reasons, but also for performance and just to make sure the bike's going to operate to the best of its ability. So looking at the 5 major options on this list, if you had to ask me which one I would choose, it would probably be a toss-up between the Norco and the Rocky Mountain. They obviously do run near the higher end of this price range, but generally speaking, you do kind of get what you pay for. But as I mentioned, these 2 bikes, more than any of the others, kind of benefit from the trickle-down effect of having much better bikes above them. So you really do get a great bike, going to last you a long time and be worthy of upgrades. So I think either of those 2 bikes would be my pick from this list. I hope you found this list and the information included helpful. If you have any questions or comments, please drop them down below. I do respond to all of my comments. If there's any bikes out there you think I missed, please put those down below. We have a lot more fat bike content coming.